Okay. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining our webinar today. The title was "Your LCAP goals have been defined and your funds allocated. What now to meet those goals?" And really, what this is about is improving performance through systems and data. And we'd like to thank CASBO for hosting us today for this webinar. My name is Jeff Owen. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships with School Innovations and Achievement.
And I am Dennis Wiechmann, Supervisor of Child Welfare and Attendance for Sanger Unified School District.
Okay, let's go ahead and jump into this. So we're talking about delivering on your LCAP. And if we look at that and the 8 priorities within the LCAP, in particular what we're talking about today is priority 5 around student engagement and how it's measured by school attendance rates and chronic absenteeism rates. What we know at this point is based on the latest Attorney General's report that just came out, the 2015 In School and On Track report, when it comes to LCAP and the goals around it with priority 5, we know that still not every district has built in goals and stated them for their chronic absence reports. They also, we do know that less than half those are including actual chronic absence data. And then within that, only 15.9 are listing actual chronic absence goals by subgroup, which if you think about it, that's the whole purpose of LCFS and LCAP is to design, to allocate those funds to help particular at-risk groups and subgroups. So we're still not quite there when it comes to data or goals. In development of that, what we're going to start with is what we would recommend that you ask yourself when determining these LCAP goals. What should your goals be? What's the expectations? What specifically are you shooting for? What data do you have, in fact, to measure your progress to those goals? Who needs to be involved to change these numbers? So when we set the goal, we're measuring them. Who has that responsibility to, in fact, make the change required to reach those goals? And then finally, do we have the systems and tools in place to efficiently and effectively report our progress accurately? So let's take the LCAP as it relates to attendance. So commonly, we do a lot of assessment and reviewing of LCAP attendance goals. And what we're still finding for the most part are generic goals. So for example, we'll see certain set percentages like 0.5% annually in reduction of chronic absenteeism. And a reminder that chronic absenteeism is defined as 10% of the school year missed, equating for both excused and unexcused absences. We'll also still see generic goals around ADA improvements. So typically, we'll see a range of percentages, 1 to 2% growth annually in average daily attendance. And then we've also seen in some cases where districts have set a target percentage in which they want to stay over. In the most part, again, what we'll tend to see are goals that they are either at or have already exceeded. In one case, I saw a district talking about remaining over 90% average daily attendance when all of their groups were in fact already over that number significantly. Now, the key thing about this one is I would argue that while we focus on the specifics about chronic and ADA rates, what we are really designing goals around is that it's for college and career readiness and improving graduation rates and decreasing dropout rates, because all of those go back to attendance and lost learning time. That through improving all of those things, by improving attendance time, reducing chronic, that the more learning time we get, the more improvement we're going to have in all of those other outcome areas that we're focused on. So let's look at the issues. So again, when we look at LCAPs or strategic plans, we still tend to see aggregated goals. And what we know is you can't manage an aggregated number, in particular ADA, because it's affected by so many different factors, from safety to weather to illnesses. And if I give you, say, 95% ADA and your goal is to get to 96, how, in fact, do I manage to get to 96 based on that number? We know that the people that have the responsibility for impacting these numbers, that are building the strategies, that are doing the outreach and engagement, they still have difficulty having access to timely, actionable, and accurate information. We're still figuring out who are the people that can fix this. What we believe is that it can no longer be relegated to one department, like pupil services or student services, child welfare and attendance, that you really have to go to the source where the absences are occurring, and that's at the site level. And even though we report on ADA, it's not really a finance issue. We really have to focus on all of the resources within the district and the sites that can be engaged in solving this issue. And that all sites are not created equal. In looking again at goals, we still see the same goal across the whole district. So for example, if our goal is to be at 95%, and I'm a site already at 95.3, or a site at 92%, the way I interpret that goal is going to be different. So we have to challenge each specific site, each specific element in our district. And that everything is relative. We believe that absolute numbers mean absolutely nothing. And I know with CASBO, one of the things that you guys are focused on is key performance indicators. So what are you using right now as your KPI for attendance? Where are you getting your information? Are you still relying on your student information system to get that? What kind of information are you pulling out of it? Who's looking at it, and how often is it being measured? And finally, who trains your sites on the understanding of that data? Everyone's performance level is different. Everybody's understanding and usage of data is different. So who has a responsibility to train staff on understanding and taking action off of the data? So here's what we believe. Attendance is not about school finances. And I know our state is driven by average daily attendance as its primary revenue source in determining our allocations. But really what we're focused on, in particular with our LCAP goal, is really about attendance is about student achievement. And let me give you some examples. What we know from research and studies is that proficiency levels are dictated by the end of third grade. That most tell us that we are learning to read by third grade and then reading to learn after that. So if that's the case, and we still battle with a misunderstanding of our parents about the amount of curriculum and the importance of learning time, particularly in kindergarten first, have you begun to look at your absence rates in kindergarten through third? We know that dropping out is not a split-second decision. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation did an extensive study on this and found that it's a gradual process, that over time students feel that they have been so far behind that they can't catch up and decide to drop out. So are you looking at attendance patterns through the course of their academic career? Are you measuring the cumulative effects of that absenteeism, in particular in the areas of transition years, from moving from elementary to middle and middle to high, where we tend to see large increases in the number of absenteeism? And then what we're finding today is it's not just about chronic absenteeism. We believe that by the time you've hit chronic, you've already missed the mark. The horse is already out of the barn. You should be looking at all students from day one of absenteeism, because we know, again, that even 1 week of school, anything less than 97%, begins to impact achievement. So are you looking at your total range of absenteeism in your district? How many days are your students missing? So ultimately, it's looking past aggregated numbers. If we're building a plan for improvement, you have to start by identifying where the problems are, and that requires disaggregated data. And finally, this is about learning time. And we still focus heavily on unexcused absences in the state, but we have to remember that both excused and unexcused absences both equal lost learning time. And from a revenue perspective, they also affect our revenue levels as well. So SINA, we do everything around 6 principles, from our development to the way we operate to the way that we coach our district. And so no matter what you're working on, in this case we're talking about attendance, but really these 6 principles can be applied to anything that you're trying to improve on. And the more that you have, the more improvement you're going to have. So let's start. It begins with process. Everything is built around process. And with process, it has to be consistent. So in this case, consistent across all of our sites, all of our employees, all of our districts. So that the message is consistent to our stakeholders, and that the data that we're using and interpreting is consistent as well. It has to be simple, it has to be repeatable, and we have to support our folks through that process. Next is measurement. So we have to be able to make sure that we're looking at the process. What results are we having? And what gets measured gets done. So we have to make sure that we have interim checkpoints along the way. With LCAPs, we're still seeing the messages: build the LCAP, design the goals, and then at the end of the year, we'll go back and look and see where we ended on those goals. We have to set some checkpoints along the way so we can see how is it working, what can we change, what can we do differently, or do we want to expand on. Timely data is critical to making those decisions. So looking at it through the year is important, and it has to be the right data at the right time. If what you're trying to accomplish in this time of the year, you want to make sure you have applicable data to that point in time. Oversight. Performance is changed when employees know that what they're doing is being measured and being looked at. So you want to make sure that you have oversight. So you want to see where the problems are occurring, where you can make adjustments along the way. But you got to be careful because you can also have too much information resulting in data paralysis. So you could have lots of table charts, you can have lots of numbers, but at some point someone's going to look at that and say, it's too much, I'll look at it later, or I don't know how to do it, so I just won't look at it at all. And then it has to be actionable. It can't just be a static number. You have to be able to look at that number and go, great, this is what I can do. Where are the holes in my process? What I can be doing better? And the data doesn't change data, people do. So you want to make sure that your folks want to work on it, that they have a process and measurement and oversight in place, and that they're getting continuous feedback. They want to be recognized for the work that they're doing. They want to make sure that people are paying attention. So if you're asking me to dedicate my time to working and improving on something, I want to make sure that you're recognizing that effort and what I'm doing. Giving status reports and timely actionable information is critical. And then reports are communication. You want to make sure that you are communicating up and down through the organization and avoiding silos. And that ongoing and training and analysis is a great way of reinforcing that communication. And make it relational. Make sure that it plays to what they're working on and what they're trying to achieve. So if we're talking about attendance, the relationship between outcomes and student improvement. And then finally, it starts with leadership, really. The superintendent, those of you in the executive cabinet, you're the ones that preach the story and paint the vision. Whatever's important to you is important to the organization. So you have to care about this improvement, and you have to acknowledge what's being worked on. So with all of those, the degree to which you pay attention or delivered about these 6 principles is directly related to how successful you will be in improving performance. So putting it on a wall, putting on a chart is one thing. But if you're diligent and your will to succeed around these 6 principles, the more you do that, the more success you're going to have. So how did we take those 6 principles and apply it to what we're trying to achieve around improving attendance? Well, what we did is we started with the process. And we looked at it from how districts operate currently. And what we found over the years of doing our work in the K-12 space is that districts still send maybe 1 to 3 different letters out notifying parents of attendance issues, still focus on truancy. As we looked at state data, we actually found that for K-12, actually district-wide, about 10% of enrollment was getting a notification, where in fact, if you're K-12, 40% of your enrollment should be getting that initial state required letter, high school 60% on upward, and elementary schools 20% on average is the amount that just the first letter should be going out. So we looked at this and said, how can we help? How can we support districts? We want to make sure there's a consistent process. So we, in fact, actually built out the number of letters, addressing both unexcused and excused absences, as well as a conference reminder notification. We wanted to make sure, as far as equity goes, that the message was understandable from our parents. So everything goes out both in English and the family's home language, and all of this is pulled out of the district student information system. And we're up to about 30 different letters at this point. We also wanted to arm the superintendent with messaging that was positive. And so we focused on the idea of showing up, that it is not just about academics, it's life lessons, that everything you do requires you to be there, engaged, on time. And it's a message not just for students, but it's also a message for staff that people can get behind. You can do some great speeches around, and it's simple to understand and in a positive tone. We also built in a place to get to that next level, that the notifications are important because they do change behavior, but there is a requirement to have that face-to-face intervention. That's where a lot of times you can sit that student down and ask them, what is going on in your life? Why are you not at school? What can we do to help? So we built in identification of students that need to have, whether a home visit or a group or an individual conference, and be able to track the outcomes and the progress of that intervention. And we built in some mobile apps to help you with that as well. We do district oversight with local control. So we are going to do all of the centralized process work ourselves, but the local sites in the district have the ability to control the system and the messaging. So if you don't want a letter to go out, you can click a box and we'll hold off sending it, but you do have oversight into those decisions. We believe in, again, the attendance analysis reporting, so we can measure outcomes along the way. We can measure progress. So we do that a couple different ways, through one-click reports, and we'll show a little bit of that today, but also coming out and sitting down with your teams to review the attendance trends, the data analysis, the comparative information, and what kind of action can we take to improve those. Everything through this process and through the system results in consistent processes across the sites, and why we get improvement with 100% of the time with no matter what kind of district that we're implementing in. And again, it's the perfect blend of software and service, that you can have the best data system in the world and technology system in the world, but if nobody's using it or understanding it, you're not going to get the results. So we built in a lot of service behind this to ensure that people are using it, that they're having, that they're trained and supported along the way. And that's what's producing our amazing results. From an effective planning standpoint, the way that we work with our districts also, and what we recommend when you're looking at your LCAPs, is utilizing SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, relative, and timely. And so the data we give and the different metrics we give you gives you a wide variety of ways to demonstrate to your community and stakeholders where you're having progress. You're not just relegated to ADA and chronic absenteeism numbers, and you can do some smart planning around it. We recently did a presentation at CASBO at the state conference with Bill McGuire around data, and if he's listening, hi, Bill. But it was from Bill that mentioned the fact that he uses A2A as the KPI of attendance. Because of our over 2 million students, the number of districts that we have, and the comparable analysis that we can show against similar districts, that you can see where you stand and where you could go and plan for. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis, and he's going to talk a little bit about what Sanger is doing, both in a partnership with us, but also some of the great programs that they're doing to achieve their goals. Go ahead, Dennis.
Great, thank you, Jeff. And again, thank you, Jeff, for allowing me to participate with this. I have done various presentations with SINA regarding the attendance to attendance, and so just from a note from Sanger Unified, we love it. I'm going to go through our results and bounce back and forth with Jeff. But coming down, if you look at our demographics, we're roughly around 11,000 students, 70% Hispanic or Latino, 15% white, 10% Asian, and 82% high needs. So low income, EL, foster youth. So when you look at that from the LCAP perspective, we have a lot of subgroups that we're targeting. One of the things that I'll say is if you just look at that information and look at our demographics, you might make an assumption on our academic achievement and also on our attendance rates for these students. And actually what we have done over the past years with our partnership and focusing on the principles of improvement that Jeff talked about earlier, we run an average at this point of 96.7% average daily attendance. Our EL population is actually higher than that, which is 97.1%. And then our special ed population is 95.1%. So when we look at that targeting that we've done and looking at the populations that traditionally their attendance rate you might expect to be lower, we think we've done a great job targeting those, and we'll cover some of the strategies that Sanger Unified does to do that in some slides later on. We also have a 95% graduation rate, and so that's something as we look at, we'll continue to push on. Ideally, 100% graduation rate is what we're targeting, and eventually we will get there. So looking at our business education partnership, this for us started 8 years ago, and I was here when it started. So we formed a partnership with SINA and attention to attendance, and started creating that culture of achieving with showing up. I'll cover our beginning attendance rate back then, but I'll tell you it was right around 94%. We were struggling. We were a PI district. We had lots of issues. And really it started, we knew those students needed to be in the classroom every day if we were going to break the mold and do something different. So our objective was obviously increasing learning time and building connections between students and families in their schools and increasing communication. The partnership with A2A really took the administrative work so our schools could focus on that real work of working with the students, engaging, the positive reinforcement. Prior to that, and I know Jeff mentioned this earlier, the whole process of the school sites doing the attendance notifications individually, we were probably lower than the percentage that he had talked about, where realistically you would expect 40% or so first truancy notifications to go out. We were probably below 10% at that point. It was very sporadic, and we didn't have an organizational process to get everybody on the same page. So as we worked, when the LCAP came through, and you look at our attendance now and our climate, we were really ahead of the game. We had been working and focusing on this, and it became part of our culture. So if you go to any of our school sites, our staff is engaged. We know how important attendance is and chronic absenteeism is, and how important it is to have the students in school every day and for us on time. So part of the process of communicating with our parents and staff, I'm going to go through, this is last year. And we look at these, every single piece of information that we send out. Obviously, the intent is to inform parents and then change behavior. And what I'll say a lot of times, that the parents, once they get the letters, they don't realize how often or how much time a student has actually missed, because they compartmentalize it, or just, they forget, oh, they had missed 2 days last month and 2 days the month before that. So as we go through, for us in that communication, we print our letters every 2 weeks. And we have 15 total letters that can go out. We have talked about one of the things we may do. We may up it to once a week. And I know SINA has the ability to do a couple different options for us. But last year we had over 15,000 pieces of parent communication. So you can look the breakdown on those. There was 4,000 initial truancy notifications, 2,000 second truancy notifications. And what I'd like to point out about that I had said before is that whole notification. So we took 4,000 students who had hit the SARB 1. There was 2,000 of those that did not hit the second SARB process, which was huge. And then when we go down and we look at that third notification, which is notifying of the habitual truant, we dropped that initial 4,000 all the way down to 465 students. So for us, that is a great save rate of keeping students, from not progressing into the SARB. One of the other letters that we have initiated that we think is hugely important and ties to the chronic absenteeism rate that the state is looking at, we now send notifications for the excessive excused absence. As those of you who are aware, the truancy notifications from the Ed code don't hit if a parent is calling in sick for their child. So for us, we have 2 of those letters that go out. We sent roughly 1,400, or excuse me, 3,800 excessive excused absence notifications, number 1. That stopped about half of those from proceeding to the second excused absence notification. And just as a note, and I'll also cover this later, I know the state has set the chronic absenteeism rate at 10%. Just in my personal opinion, I think that is extremely, that is 18 absences per year, way too high. So attention to attendance gives us the flexibility to set those triggers when we want. So our first excessive excused absence notification goes out after five illness calls in, and then the next one, the second one, is generated after 9. So we're a little bit faster than what the state would recommend. And then we conducted, and I'll tell you, we actually conducted over 600 conferences. That means from the second truancy notifications, which is that 2,000, working with, there were 609 meetings that took place to address that. And what I'll tell you, it's probably actually higher than that. Well, I'll tell Sanger successes. We can also, SINA is very good about saying, okay, this is looking at your data, this is an area that you would need to work on. And making sure that we conduct all of the conferences is one of the areas that we will be addressing coming into this year based off of the end-of-year reports and meetings with SINA. So just again, going through how that partnership has helped us. Throughout the year, we get 2 status reports that let us know where we are and what we're doing. 3 chronic absenteeism reports that not only hit the district level, but is Jeff had talked about, disaggregates it to the individual school site level. And then 6 intervention reports that are district specific that really talk to us on, and what I had said earlier on that conferencing, and it keeps us up to date. So if my staff gets busy, and all of a sudden, I'm sure it happens with you guys, all of a sudden we're into October, and then it's November. If I forget that, the SINA staff and our support is calling up and saying, hey, you know, we're looking at your conferencing, and it looks like this specific school is falling behind in what they need to do, and then we start working with those schools. So it's almost like an extra administrator in my office. As we go through, we've done 5 on-site trainings. 4 of them are web-based and 1 was in person. We've had 70 communication touch points with the help desk and updating to the sites and working on our letter triggers. And then I think I put that in there because the accessible, the team at SINA and working with this is accessible enough that we can call and get answers very quickly. My staff can call and my school sites can call and very responsive when we have issues that we need to take care of. And then there's emails that come out that keep us up to date on do's and don'ts. They go to our staff. And so it's that continual communication, just keeping attendance on everybody's radar. And for us, it's almost a little bit different. We're high enough at 96.7 that we worry about that, you know, complacency and saying, oh, we're good, so we can slack off a little bit. So we really continue to kind of keep the gas pedal down and going on that. And then the fall chronic absenteeism report and the spring chronic absenteeism report is also very helpful to gauge us from the State Department perspective and LCAP where we're at and how we're doing on meeting those goals. And so the district-wide absence summary at this point, Jeff, I will turn that over to you.
Thank you, Dennis. So before Dennis goes into some of the ways that they're able to utilize their team now, as far as the time that we were able to take off their plates as far as the production work, I want to go into a little bit of the examples of how we are disaggregating data and providing to Sanger and our clients so that they can focus on areas of improvement and be able to have data in which to build out their goals and report on progress. So with that, we do part of what we do is we normalize data so that we can, no matter what your process is, your notifications and your triggers, that we want to be able to show you and be able to compare you against our overall client network, again, about 2 million students, and then our top performers so that you can see where you stand and, again, be able to have better information in which to set some goals. So when we look at this and we break down all of our data into these categories, we look at it from a truancy perspective. And so these are our stakes in the ground, which is we look at any student with 3 or more full days or the period of equivalency for our secondaries, which is 18. The excessive excused absences, which is anything of 7 or more full days due to excused absences or 42 periods altogether. Combined absences is a combination of both the truant and the excessive excused students. And then finally, the chronic absent rate of 10% or more of the school year based on both excused and unexcused. And then there's one way that we break it out. So knowing where our issues are, knowing where we need to focus. So in this case, this is Sanger's data. So they have a 42.9% combined absence rates, and that is generated primarily through truancy still, but then almost 14% excessively excused. And then you can see the chronic rate. And this is something that we break out for the district along the way. And then for the sites, this is something that we calculate every week or every time we do a pull of the district's data automatically. And again, we sit on every single different type of student information system. So using our data robot technology, we're able to extract the data out of the student information system and calculate this for you. So in terms of comparison, again, saying that absolute numbers mean absolutely nothing, we want to know where we stand with our percentages. So in this chart, what I'm showing you is that blue is Sanger and how they compare against our overall average. So in combined absence rates, they're doing better than our overall data, but they could still get to where our top performers are. I mentioned the idea of also looking at where our target areas are in terms of total absences and seeing where we can focus. And on this one, what we stress with our clients is, for the most part, if you look in that excellent category, so these are kids with less than 2 days missed. And this is, again, no matter the type of reason that they're out. These are the kids that we're oftentimes recognizing and addressing through our through award ceremonies, our assemblies, things like that. And then on the other side of it, the chronic and the severely chronic is obviously a focus of most of our districts, and probably take up almost the entirety of the resources that we have to focus on attendance. But what tends to get missed are those manageable and satisfactory groups. And that manageable group is that group that's just below chronic, that if we put some emphasis on, we'd say that they're on the tipping point. If we can focus on them, then we can prevent them from moving from chronic, and through communication and acknowledging the issue, we can move them back to the better side, the excellent and the satisfactory. We're not trying to solve world hunger at this point. We know that there's a lot of really difficult, extenuating circumstances that a lot of our families and our students face. But for the most part, what we find is that parents either don't understand the importance of attendance, or they don't understand or recognize the number of absences that they've accumulated over the year. So by getting our sites and our districts to pay attention to each of these categories, we can build specific interventions and make sure that communication is happening, so we can begin to shift this pie around, and then we have more resources to focus on those chronic and severely chronic students. Go ahead, Dennis. And then breaking that out, again, looking at specific issues, we begin to break it out by grade and looking to see where our percentages are, where we can focus. So for Sanger, it's a real emphasis on our 12th graders, and at the same time paying attention to those kindergarten through third grade attendance levels. And then for them, we'll do comparative analysis year over year and against our overall clients. Go ahead.
It's just going slow, Jeff. So
okay.
Let me see if it will. Hold on. There we go. All right.
And again, same idea. We're looking at truancy. This is breakdown against excessive excused absence rates. The green bar is our overall average, and then the yellow is our top performers.
Okay.
Go ahead. I think I just talked about that.
Oh, it did. It switched.
Oh, okay. Mine's still lagging.
Oh, yeah. It was just
E rate.
Yeah.
Go ahead and click again.
Okay. So that's going to jump into me?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So where I'm going to take it is from Jeff presenting our specific results and then comparing them to the average that they have for the whole state with the database that they collect. So where I wanted to jump back down to and say, okay, how does that actually make a difference for a district, and what does that look like? So when we started that partnership, the year before we started the partnership in 03 and 04, those were our actual attendance rates. And you can see at some points within there, we actually had dipped down to 92%. And as I had said previously, the focus that we had, we knew attendance was important, but it wasn't a direct focus. We didn't have the model to deal with it. It was not centralized. And really, any of those processes that Jeff had talked about with the 6 principles of improvement, we're doing none of those at that point. As you forward to, and this actually should have been 13-14 on this, these are our actuals for the 13-14 school year. And we have stayed up around 96.7, right around in there for the past three years or so. So we gradually got up to that, and now we're in our sustaining and saying, okay, we're going to push more and continue to increase that. So the question then becomes, how did Sanger do that, and what was our processes through doing that? And so
hey, Dennis.
We go through, yeah.
Dennis,
yeah.
One second before
Can you hear me?
But I know we're getting some questions through the chat box. I'm not sure if we'll have time today to address those, but what I'd like you to do in the audience is go ahead and pose your questions through the chat box. My email will also be at the end of this, so you can email me directly your questions that you have, and then I can coordinate with Dennis on responding to your specific question. And that'll probably be through email, or we can reach out to you depending on your question.
Okay. Okay. So as we're going through, and I know I see that question pop up, so this will address some of that, at least that question too. So just the Sanger story, I touched on a little bit, so I'm going to go through this. This was our typical thing going into it, challenging demographics, wasn't sure that the focus was on learning, questionable cultures of what the expectations for our minority and subgroup populations were, the achievement gap as everybody else had, and then economic challenges that we were going into at that time frame with the state budget issues. And I said this before, we knew that SAR, we knew what SAR was, but it wasn't a direct focus. Everything was manually generated. We did have part-time attendance clerks at each school site, so we had allocated funds for that. That has continued with us. Each school was provided with an incentive budget, and so we started to also get into the positive reinforcements. And we looked at it as a district effort. And so I know Jeff had talked about that message and that vision. We took it from a site issue into a district leadership issue. And this was, when we talk about communication, this became very important. At every leadership meeting, we report on that. And so now at every leadership meeting, we're reporting on the LCAP goals, where we're at meeting those. And the business department, this is where it talks about, we really, previous to us engaging with SINA and looking at attendance specifically, we really operated in silos. We had our, school sites were a silo, the district office is a silo, and the business department was a silo. But we brought everybody together, and the business department became one of the strongest advocates for the data and using the data. So we then had everybody working together. The other note that I'll tell you on our attendance, we included every school. Our alternative ed, we have those same expectations for the alternative ed school sites that we do for the regular school sites. So this is going through, you guys know this, that when the budget really crashed and went sideways for the State Department and everybody started losing money, we looked at that and just started to say, okay, how are we going to start targeting this? And we knew if we could increase, and this is, again, this is reported, it's there, we deal with finance, that's how the district, obviously finance is what we do, but the backside of it is a learning time. So we knew if we could increase by 0.5% for us, it was roughly $160,000. This is the bigger part. We started looking at the instructional minutes that students were missing and really focused on that, and that was the communication that we would start to give to the parents. Because to say, oh, well, your child needs to come to school, so we can get more funding isn't the same motivation and same message we wanted to communicate versus it's about graduating. It's about getting, and as Jeff said, that K to 3, getting those habits started early and trying to reduce our dropout rate by attacking that. We have a supportive learning environment and looking at it as an opportunity. And then again, the SINA, the board report and online monitoring for us was very huge. So it is an investment for us. At this point it's almost hard to quantify because it has been so successful for us. It made such a difference with our students and by default our academic achievement along with everything else that we have done. So we have professional development. We do that with the principals and attendance clerks. We are doing training to refresh our training coming up this month. And training all of the attendance clerks again on scheduling meetings on what they need to do. And we're training all of our principals to really utilize the data dashboard that's provided with some of those pictures that Jeff, some of the slides that Jeff had covered. Our board policies are there. As Jeff said, the leadership is a priority. That message has to come not only for the superintendent, but from all of our directors all the way down to the principals. and it's every school, every month. We are constantly in communication with the schools, and the schools are constantly in communication with their parents. The other thing that we do, we follow through on all aspects of the SARB letters, and that goes from us, the first SARB notification, all the way to going to court. So as we go through the results that we had with this partnership, the awareness that we generated, not only within the organization, but within the community was amazing. The enhanced communication, parents getting the letters, understanding how important attendance was. We actually, ultimately, when we started looking at the reduction of absences, we increased the number of instructional days that students were actually in their seat. And I'm going to go to this, not only in their seat, but in their seat and on time, because we also do notifications for tardies that are less than 30 minutes. So we push the whole spectrum. We've also minimized long-term absences. We do a tremendous amount of incentives and celebrations. And this goes down to the school sites. We have schools that will have competitions, whatever classroom, can get the highest attendance for that month, gets an ice cream party or pizza party. We have allocated, so talking about LCAP funds and meeting those goals, at high school, we have allocated $40,000 to address and meet those goals, directed at specific target areas. So in the middle school, we have one high school, we have one middle school. The middle school is roughly about $22,000 or $23,000 that they have for the positive side of it. So we use the SARB process as potentially the notifications, and it can get to the consequences side of it, but we also focus on the positive side of increasing attendance. So for us, our student learning has gone up significantly. We got out of PI. For those of you who know the Sanger Unified story, we have been featured, across the nation. We're invited to participate in the core group, and so we're very proud of what we've done. And the attendance was one part of that. We have a lot of other parts that obviously went into that. But if the students weren't in class, in their seat, and on time, the other stuff wouldn't work. So we've increased our graduation rate. We've identified our chronic absenteeism kids and worked on addressing those. We've been successful in closing the achievement gap. We also, when I talk about the response to intervention, we are very involved with the RTI model, also PBIS, so the positive behavioral interventions and systems for all of our schools, and the socio-emotional learning. And all of that really is based on a theoretical model of resiliency. And so we do a lot of focus towards that. So when you look at it, since where we started, we have maintained and sustained really almost a 2.25% growth over where we were year after year after year after year. And I always put this up here in the slide because you never know when the state budget is going to fall apart again or that's going to happen. So because of what we did, we were able to withstand some of the issues that were happening with other districts, and feel as we continue to press that we'll be in a good position if indeed we have to go through that again. So just going through, we use the SARB process. So now I'm going to talk about that specifically. We're very aggressive with the SARB process. So according to Ed Code, if you miss 3 days or 3 periods greater than 30 minutes, you're getting your first SARB letter. We have included now, if you remove your child from school 30 minutes early and it's unexcused. We also have implemented a Sibling Rule, which means that if one child in that family is going to a third SARB meeting with me at the district, we bring all of the children in and have the schools report on their information so we can see if it's a familial issue versus if it's just a one student issue. So, and you can look through that. The excessive excused absence letters, I've mentioned this before, I think those are huge. We had plateaued at some point, probably 3 years into partnering with SINA, and then we added the excessive excused absence and got a very good response from that and increased our ADA rate significantly. For us, we file roughly 40 to 50 cases in court. This is what I'm going to tell you. I like the idea of creative tension. We put enough tension on the families for them to react, but not so much that it's going to break them. So we tell them what the expectations are, but then we also have a lot of support that we deal with them, and a lot of counseling and mental health services that we can offer if needed. And so, just my note, we would not have been able to do this and without the organization, the training, the data management, the letter generations that we use with attention to attendance. So as I go through, I've talked about this before, but everybody's included in alternative ed. Everybody's on board, all the way down to our classroom and our parents. And that consistency of leadership and the continuous improvement that we do, it is in our culture now. It took a while to get there originally. The naysayers were there, oh, those kids can't, they're not going to get their attendance rate any more up than 89%. They're not going to be able to do it. We've shown that if you use the improvement process, then indeed you can increase student attendance and student learning. And so, Jeff, I think this is where I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yeah, and we're doing pretty good on time here. I want to address a couple of questions here that were posed. The first one question was, should chronic absence rates be given to the board on a regular basis? What I'm going to talk about here is, I think it's more than chronic. And again, I think this focus on chronic narrows the importance overall of attendance. And I think this is a good slide to demonstrate that, which is I would keep both my board and all of my stakeholders, from principals, APs to teachers, understanding where we're at on our attendance rates. So, for example, I talked about it earlier in the program. So this is not Sanger Unified. This is another client's information, but it's very typical of what we see, which is if proficiency levels are dictated by third grade, and we know through research that even 5 to 10 absences a year in kindergarten and first dramatically affects the ability for reading, writing, and math, then are we looking at these absenteeism? Are we communicating to our parents and our community and our board and our leadership teams that we are missing 35%? We have a truancy rate of 35% in kindergarten, and we'll actually see that sometimes worse on the excused side of it, because that's typically the type of absences we have in the elementary level. This is the type of information that we should be disseminating. I have one high schooler and I have 2 elementary school students, and I've been to every back-to-school night. And every time I go, I'm obviously listening for any type of mention or discussion around attendance. And to this point in time, I have heard 0, not once. We typically hear the idea of, this is what we're covering this year, this is the curriculum, these are the field trips, this is my request list from parents and what we'd love you to donate, but never the fact that if you can just have your student here on time every day, that's the number one thing I can get from a parent. But again, looking at this type of information, and on the flip side of it, if we know that attendance is the number one indicator of dropping out, and also if you look at some great research coming from the University of Chicago, is that they have found that GPA and attendance are the number one indicators for college and career readiness, way exceeding any other, from demographics to subgroups to 8th grade test scores. Nothing comes close to GPA and attendance in particular. So are we looking at this jump in attendance in our, from when we go from elementary, in this case 6th to 7th, from 8th to 9th, the big jump, and then the escalation of lost learning time? So are we paying attention to those and disseminating that information? So to that question about the board, definitely I would report consistently out on attendance patterns, not necessarily just chronic, because we're also engaging our community in developing those goals. So they're going to want to see, are we progressing to what we've laid out? All right, Dennis. And then we've got some additional reporting. This will answer another question, which was, the question was, are we reporting out chronic on by subgroup? Well, in this case, what I'm showing you here, and it might be a little small, but what I try to circle out, is this is something that our school sites and our district have access to through our web-based application, and it's updated every time we produce those attendance letters, so which is typically on a weekly basis. And what I'll kind of describe for you is it's by the students. So we've broken it out, as I showed in the pie chart, by the different categories based on the percentage of absences and lost instructional days. So we're breaking it down for the school site to the individual student. So there's no chance of students falling through the cracks. So we see what intervention letters they've received, what category they're in, what percentage of the year missed, what's the day equivalency to that, and the total student instructional days lost. This is what it boils down to, lost learning time. How do we recover that lost learning time? So that's one of our new charts. Go ahead, Dennis. And then in regards to your subgroup, we do know that this is critical, especially to the LCAP and reporting out. So we do pull the fields out of the student information system to be able to project for you and break down for you through the year your subgroup data, for example, lunch status, English language learner. Go ahead. Gender. So any type of field that we can pull out in data, we can report on and are already doing so. And then finally, the question was, should STAR be the leadership team working on chronic and kind of heading the charge? What we would say is that, again, this can't be relegated to one department. And, you know, the STAR team is actually, a natural place that we would think it should be championed, and it is, because they understand what the ramifications are to attendance. But really where this should be is an entire district effort, starting from the superintendent on down. And that's very well demonstrated in Sanger with Matt Navo and the executive and the cabinet there and the team, including Dennis, in leading this charge. So it's something that's discussed about with our principals, with our teachers, from custodians across the district, enforcing this idea of showing up, discussing this idea of the importance of attendance, which then gets communicated out to all of our stakeholders. So the STAR team should definitely be talking about what the results are and what's the impact of the SAR, because the SAR is a fantastic program, but it needs to start way before that, and it shouldn't just be one voice with something so critical to everything we're trying to achieve with our students. And again, that talks about college and career readiness, from dropouts to grad rates, all of those things that we're looking for. And just one more kind of final bullet point on that is this also has to be a focus on all students, even the ones that we think are top performers and on track to graduate high school. Another really important stat that I find really relative is that University of Chicago looked at kids that had above average assessment scores coming out of 8th grade and looked at the comparative analysis in their 9th grade year of GPA against attendance rates. And so from that, what they found was students leaving middle school with a GPA on average of 3.5 and leaving high school with a GPA of 3.0, only 50% of those students were graduating college with a 4-year degree, meaning half of those students were going to college unprepared to take college-level courses. And on average, the kids that had 0 to 5 absences were those 3.0 students. In one additional week per semester, dropped that 3.0 to a 2.7. Again, students we would believe and are going to graduate from high school, but are we really preparing them for life after K-12? And it really boils down to attendance. So I would say the more that you can reinforce this and communicate it throughout the organization, I think Dennis gave some really great examples of how to do that, will benefit the entire district, the students, and the community as well. So just in closing, we appreciate all of your time. And again, please feel free to post any questions in the chat window. You have my information here that you can call me. My email is jeffo@sia-us.com. You can email me directly any of your questions, and again, I'll coordinate with Dennis and we can respond to that. And then again, if you don't have these 6 principles and you're struggling to do that, and that's understandable, it took us nearly a decade and over $30 million to develop this program and getting it to the point where we're having improvement with every single district that we bring on board. Feel free to give us a call. And then, Dennis, I know you have an announcement about a CASBO event coming up as well.
Yes. What I'd like to do, just from Jeff and I are doing a presentation for the California Association of Supervisors of Child Welfare and Attendance in December in Paso Robles. So if there's specific questions too, or you will get a little bit more in detail into what Sanger does and what we do, I will have SINA forward that information out. They're also covering PBIS and some neurological issues to increase learning in the classroom. So we'll forward that flyer to you guys if you're interested.
So again, thank you all for spending some time with us today to learn how we're focused on LCAP and improving attendance. And thank you again to CASBO for hosting the session today. Thank you very much.